As we consider the bill before us today, and in particular its first two schedules, we should be reminded of the challenge which these important measures aim to address. My electorate of Fisher is fortunate enough to be home to a great many ex-servicemen and women. Our healthy lifestyle and our environment, our welcoming and friendly community and our vibrant RSL clubs make the coast a perfect place to enjoy civilian life. Estimates of the number of veterans on the Sunshine Coast vary, but in 2016 RSL Queensland assessed the figure at more than 15,000. Sadly, however, even on the Sunshine Coast, life after service for those who've risked their lives in the defence of our nation can be extremely challenging. For anyone, such a dramatic change of circumstances, from the rigours of a highly structured military life to the casual independence of the civilian world, would be difficult to assimilate. And I recognise the service that you've given this country, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'm sure that the debate that you'll hear this morning or this afternoon will ring true for you. For all of us, any life transition of that magnitude, from leaving home to changing state, can lead to an increased risk of poor mental health. For many servicemen and women, however, this transition is made all the more difficult by their experiences in the ADF. For those who have served this country in uniform, who've spent long and worrying periods away from their families, or who've seen the painful impacts that conflict can have on innocent civilians, the effects can be devastating. The Turnbull government has been exceptionally alive to the issue of veterans' mental health and has commissioned a series of reports which have demonstrated the true scale of the challenge. The government's Transition and Wellbeing Research Program, Study Mental Health Prevalence, released this year, showed how widespread poor mental health is among our veterans. 46.4% of transitioned ADF members were estimated to have experienced a mental disorder in the past 12 months alone. Of those, more than a third had experienced an anxiety disorder, with nearly 1 in 5 suffering from PTSD. Others suffered from depression and substance dependency. Almost 3/4 were estimated in the report to have suffered from a mental disorder at some point in their life. This accords with previous government research which showed that in 2013, of the 148,000 veterans with service-related disabilities being supported by the Department of Veterans Affairs, 46,400, almost a third, were living with an accepted mental health disorder. The Mental Health Prevalence Report also showed the stark contrast between veterans and the wider population. Reporting of high or very high psychological distress among transition members of the ADF at 33.1% is nearly three times higher than the wider Australian community. Sadly, in just the past 12 months, 28.9% of transitioned ADF, more than a quarter, had felt that their life was not worth living. The government's second report this year, titled Incidents of Suicide Among Service and Ex-Serving Australian Defence Force Personnel, has found that in far too many cases this feeling has the worst possible consequences. The report found that in the 14 years between 2001 and 2015, there were 325 deaths by suicide among people who had served in the ADF for at least one day since 2001. It should and will be a distressing statistic for all of our constituents. 325 men and women who volunteered to serve to protect us all, but who since have come to feel that they have no option but to take their own lives. Unfortunately, in reality, there were no doubt more, as data is not available for those who served before 2001. When explored in more detail, the statistics reveal once again that the transition to civilian life is where we can make the biggest difference. Men currently serving in the ADF or in the reserves have a significantly lower suicide rate than men in the general population. And I say men because this study only dealt with men, because there were no actual statistics of women having committed suicide. Benefiting from the company of their fellow servicemen and women, and with the excellent work the ADF undertakes to support its soldiers through unimaginably stressful experiences, current personnel are 53% less likely to die by suicide than their peers. However, among male veterans, the suicide rate was 14% higher than for the equivalent general population. As I've said before, the day that a man leaves the armed forces, his likelihood of death by suicide rises from 53% lower than others his age to 14% higher. If he is aged 18 to 24, he becomes twice as likely as his peers to die by his own hand after he discharges. These figures have stayed stable since 2007, but the Mental Health Prevalence Report shows that there are still many more veterans potentially at risk. In the past 12 months, 21.2% of transition members of the ADF had considered taking their own lives, and 8% had even made a specific plan to do so. It is this vital challenge that the first two schedules of this bill will help to address. The positive impact of the measures included in Schedule 2 are clear. The Veteran Suicide Prevention Pilot will aim to support 100 ex-servicemen and women over the next 2 years. The pilot will work in particular with ex-ADF personnel who have been hospitalised following a suicide attempt, have considered suicide, or who are at increased risk of suicide as a result of ongoing mental health disorders. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm particularly pleased to see that this pilot will take place in 9 hospitals in Brisbane. I'm hopeful that if these pilots are successful, we may see similar projects rolled out throughout South East Queensland and in my own region of the Sunshine Coast in particular. The impact of Schedule 1 will be less direct, but I believe just as effective. In the ADF, servicemen and women have a mission, they have a sense of purpose and a rightful position of respect in our community. For too many, when they leave the ADF overnight, these life-affirming—
Order. The member for Dobell.
Deputy Speaker, I call your attention to the state of the House.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it's extremely disturbing that the Labor Party want to play petty games, petty party political games on an issue that is so important to this country and so important in relation to veterans. Very disappointing. Anyway, as I was saying, for too many, when they leave the ADF overnight, these life-affirming benefits depart with the uniform. One day, a young man or woman might be flying, driving or sailing multi-million or in fact multi-billion-dollar equipment. Upon discharge, however, many struggle to get meaningful work. This contrast is one of the biggest factors leading to poor mental health among recently transitioned personnel. The Turnbull government is already doing a great deal to make this transition more successful. I spoke about many of these measures at length during debate on the first veteran-centric reforms bill in February, so I'll not repeat the full list. Most recently, we've sought to change regulations so that the Department of Defence can inform the DVA directly and immediately when a serving member has become a veteran, and ensured that every serviceman and woman will be guaranteed access to the personal documentation that they need in civilian life before they are discharged. We've also invested $2.7 million for the Prime Minister's Veterans Employment Program to help businesses understand the unique skills and attitudes ADF members have developed during their service, and I look forward to seeing this currently modest initiative expand and develop in the not-too-distant future. However, if we want to make a dramatic difference, Mr Deputy Speaker, to the mental health of our former servicemen and women, I believe that education and in particular tertiary education is the answer. For those who are not leaving the ADF for a job or to start a business, entry into a degree or a vocational education course immediately gives veterans a new mission to accomplish and an organised path to tread. Once they reach that new goal and graduate, they will have significantly improved employment prospects. And as we all know, the best form of welfare is a job. As I've discussed in very positive meetings with the Minister for Veterans Affairs, ultimately, I believe we should work toward what I call an Assisted Tertiary Education for ADF Veterans program, or ATEV for short. ATEV would support all eligible veterans to undertake a 4-year university degree or vocational education course paid for by the Commonwealth. It would be Australia's equivalent of the famous US GI Bill, which has been paying for American veterans to go to university for more than 50 years, and which has seen 453,000 degrees earned since 9/11. Eventually, not only would such a program be a meaningful reward for service and a powerful recruiting tool, but it could also dramatically improve mental health outcomes and reduce the need for more government support. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll continue to advocate for an ATEV in the future. However, in the immediate term, there are actually already veterans who are benefiting from this kind of support, and Schedule 1 of this bill will ensure that those veterans can make the most of the opportunity. Currently, if a veteran is unable to work or has a reduced capacity to work as a result of an injury or illness which is related to their service, they are eligible to receive incapacity payments from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Where relevant, these individuals are placed into a rehabilitation plan to help them to increase their capability to return to paid employment. For some, this rehabilitation plan includes payment from the DVA to complete—
Order. The member's time has expired.
To continue my debate.
Is leave granted?
Leave is not granted.
Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 1, I seek leave on motion that the member continue his speech owing to the fact that it was interrupted under a standing order.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
Order. The result of the division is ayes 71, no 60. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative, and I call the member for Fisher.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it is extremely unfortunate that those opposite continue to play party, petty political games on an issue that is so important to Australia, and that is the care of our veterans. Shame on you. Shame on you. And I thank this side of the House for encouraging and supporting me an extension of time to talk on this important issue. As I was saying, Mr Deputy Speaker, currently, if a veteran is unable to work or has a reduced capacity to work as a result of an injury or illness which is related to their service, they are eligible to receive incapacity payments from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Where relevant, these individuals are placed into a rehabilitation plan to help them to increase their capability to return to paid employment. For some, this rehabilitation plan includes payment from the DVA to complete a tertiary education course to help with their transition to a new, now more suitable career. However, at present, veterans' incapacity payments step down to 75% of their normal earnings after a period of 45 weeks in receipt of the payment. Tertiary education courses, Mr Deputy Speaker, as you well know, often take substantially longer than 45 weeks to complete, and as such, some veterans who are studying full-time can face a large decrease in their income while their courses are still ongoing. This can be stressful in itself, especially where veterans have a family to support. but it also risks a higher rate of non-completion of these Commonwealth-supported courses. Schedule 2 changes this incapacity payments regime such that eligible veterans participating in a DVA rehabilitation plan and studying full-time as part of their plan will receive incapacity payments at 100% of their normal earnings without the step-down at 45 weeks. This will directly benefit around 150 veterans per year, but the flow-on effects in completed courses, improved employment prospects and mental health outcomes will be significant. I look forward, Mr Deputy Speaker, to finding out what lies ahead for the veterans who complete courses under this bill when enacted. I'm also excited to see what possibilities their successors will suggest for broadened access to Commonwealth-supported tertiary education for veterans. As a nation, we owe it to our veterans not to see them as broken men and women, but as remarkable, highly skilled individuals who have served our nation with distinction and who can offer private industry and public life a great deal. That is what I saw when I visited the ADF in Afghanistan last year with the ADF parliamentary program. And it is what I have seen with the young veteran, Justin Seamish, who has been working in my own office. It is what will inspire me to continue to work with the Minister to find ways to improve veterans' prospects in civilian life throughout my time as a parliamentarian. Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill before us is an important step in the right direction, and I commend it to the House.